Imagine, like, recording an album so massive, I mean, so culturally dominant, that the legendary rock band recording in the studio next door wanders over and is just genuinely shocked to see you.
Right. And not because of your fame, but because you're actually still playing your instruments in the exact same room together at the very same time.
Which is crazy,
Mm-hmm.
because that band, staring through the studio glass in disbelief, was Muse, and the band they were watching was Green Day. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
It really is a fundamental rarity in the modern music industry. I mean, most bands at that echelon don't even record in the same city anymore, let alone the exact same tracking room.
Exactly. So our mission today is to figure out exactly how a scrappy DIY punk trio managed to achieve this monumental stadium rock longevity without fracturing into, isolated egos.
We have a really fascinating stack of broadcast material today. We're pulling from extended interviews from CBS Morning's Q with Tom Power, Sunrise in Australia.
BBC Breakfast, too.
Yeah, BBC Breakfast, and a highly amusing vintage snippet from Time magazine. We're looking at 30 years of conceptual reinventions and massive cultural relevance.
It's basically like surviving a 30-year wild roller coaster ride where the wheels somehow never actually came off.
Yeah, and to understand the mechanics of how Green Day sustains that massive arena status today, we actually have to start at the exact place that banned them for getting too big.
Right, 924 Gilman Street in Berkeley, California, which wasn't just a venue, it was an entirely volunteer-run ecosystem.
With strict, painted-on-the-door rules, like no racism, no sexism, no homophobia.
It was a haven, a place where latchkey kids in the late 80s learned community values and how to do absolutely everything themselves. They loved it. They painted their band name on the wall when they did a demo there in 1988. It was their entire universe.
But Gilman had one other uncompromising rule, which was no major label bands. Everything had to remain fiercely independent. Yeah, so when Green Day inevitably outgrew that 200-person room and signed a major label deal to make their breakout album, Dookie, they triggered the club's ultimate tripwire. They were permanently banned.
I always think about that dynamic as, like, being kicked out of your childhood home just because you finally got a promotion at work.
That's a great way to put it. The band described it as utterly heartbreaking at the time.
But I've got to push back on this classic 90s sellout narrative because it always irritated me. They weren't betraying their punk roots. They were just kids who realized they wanted to actually hear themselves on the radio. They didn't want to go back to working at UPS or flipping burgers.
And the preparation they put in really proves it was about ambition, not just cashing a check. Before they ever stepped foot in a high-end studio with producer Rob Cavallo to record Dookie, they went up to Mendocino County.
To Trey Cool's parents' house, right?
Exactly, the drummer's parents' house. And they meticulously mapped out the entire album on a 4-track recorder.
Which, we should clarify for anyone listening who hasn't messed around with vintage audio gear. A 4-track is essentially a cheap, primitive cassette recorder you'd use in your childhood bedroom.
Right. It forces you to figure out exactly what the song is before you add any bells and whistles. And that constraint was their secret weapon.
Because they knew what they were doing.
Exactly. When they finally transitioned from that bedroom cassette recorder to the massive, expensive 2-inch analog tape of a major studio, they weren't wasting thousands of dollars a day trying to find their sound. They already had it locked in.
Wow.
Those demo cassettes actually sat in preservation for 30 years, and listening back to them recently, it's obvious they explicitly knew how to avoid making a record that sounded dated to 1993. They were engineering a timeless pop-punk sound.
That relentless preparation completely recontextualizes what happened next at Woodstock 94.
Yeah.
Because everyone remembers the legendary mud fight.
Oh, the mud fight.
A massive crowd hurling so much mud at the stage that the band's equipment is literally getting destroyed. Billy Joe Armstrong is pulling his pants down on pay-per-view, which, by the way, greatly upset his mother watching at home.
I can imagine.
And there's a live track from that day just called Shit Show, because it's literally the sound of their instruments drowning in mud.
But here's the thing. In any other scenario, a band loses control of a crowd that aggressive and their career tanks. But because Green Day was so musically locked in from that 4-track preparation, the chaos became theater. They were tight enough as a band to just play through the barrage.
Right after Woodstock, they hit the Lollapalooza tour.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of kids are rushing security. Fans are getting their teeth knocked out in the pit.
It was absolute mayhem.
The band felt it instantly, that terrifying, thrilling moment of realizing their lives had permanently changed. Dookie goes on to sell tens of millions of records. And this is the point where the typical rock lifespan dictates that a band finds a comfortable formula and just churns out sequels for the rest of their lives.
Well, the industry metrics of success almost trapped them into doing exactly that. I mean, their follow-up album, Insomniac, went 4 times platinum.
Which is huge.
In any rational universe, 4 million albums sold is a staggering triumph. But because it didn't match the freak anomaly of Dookie's 10 million, parts of the industry viewed it as a failure.
That is so wild.
By the time the early 2000s rolled around, a significant portion of the music press had basically written Green Day off as a fading nostalgia act.
But instead of retreating into just playing their greatest hits, they swing for the absolute conceptual fences. They decide they want to make their version of St. Pepper's or Ziggy Stardust.
Right, they want to build a monumental rock opera.
Which becomes American Idiot. But I want to question the whole punk band label here. By the time American Idiot drops, they're operating as a grandiose classic rock band in disguise.
Yeah, and the psychological mechanism behind this pivot is what's truly compelling. To jump from writing 2-minute songs about teenage panic attacks to composing a 9-minute multi-movement rock opera.
Anchored by a character named Jesus of Suburbia, no less.
Exactly. To do that, they had to bypass their own punk rock guilt.
Which they did by essentially building a sandbox in this studio in Oakland. They started wearing a uniform, like
Black shirts, red ties.
eyeliner, yeah.
That wardrobe change provided psychological armor. When you adopt a gang mentality and create literal alter egos like the character Saint Jimmy, it gives you the necessary distance from your own insecurities.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Billy Joe wasn't a 30-something punk rocker worrying if his old Gilman Street friends would think a 9-minute song was pretentious. He was playing a character.
It allowed them to structure a massive theatrical rock album without feeling self-conscious.
And the craziest part of that creation story is what they did the moment the record was finished. They retreated to a little crow's nest area in the studio, just the 3 of them, and made a pact to completely ignore whatever the press was going to say.
They wanted to bottle the immense pride they felt in that room and protect it from outside metrics.
An ironic pact, considering the press universally lauded the record and it gave them a massive second life. But that sheer compulsion to create didn't just switch off, right?
No, it later drove them into the Uno Dos Tres trilogy. They released 38 songs across 3 albums in rapid succession. They categorized the first as a classic sound, the second as a garage party from hell, and the third as the musical hangover.
That kind of marathon creative output is exactly what forces a band to reevaluate how they function. It leads to this inevitable question. How does a band writing about teenage apathy on Dookie and grandiose anti-war operas on American Idiot transition into writing music as men deep into their 50s?
By allowing their worldview to age alongside their bodies. Billy Joe noted how singing a lyric like "Smash the State" feels entirely natural when you were a naive teenager.
Yeah.
But a 50-year-old man screaming "Smash the State" just sounds hollow. It's unearned. As you age, you lose the black and white certainties of youth.
The band pointed out that aging brought them a massive dose of empathy. Specifically, empathy for family members or neighbors who sit on the complete opposite end of the political spectrum.
Which is a huge shift. You start to see how systems impact people differently rather than just viewing everyone as an enemy to the cause.
And that's deeply evident on their recent album, Saviors. They moved into deliberate, observational songwriting, what they call a line-by-line approach.
Right. But before we get into the politics of the album, we should explicitly tell you listening right now that we are just examining the band's artistic choices here. We aren't endorsing any political ideology, just impartially reporting on how they view the world in their music.
Oh, absolutely. But I do have to challenge their perspective entirely for a second. Can guys who haven't worried about a mortgage or a grocery bill in 30 years genuinely write authentic protest music about the working class struggle?
It's a fair question.
Right. Like when millionaire rock stars release a song called "The American Dream is Killing Me," is there not a massive, undeniable disconnect there?
Well, if they were writing from the perspective of someone currently punching a clock at a factory, absolutely, that would be completely inauthentic. But the line-by-line approach means they are observing the structural changes around them, not pretending to actually live them.
Okay, that's a distinction.
They are looking at the concept of the American dream chronologically. They look back at their own working-class parents, a truck driver and a waitress, who could somehow afford to buy a house and raise children in California in the 1970s.
Sure, but isn't that just nostalgia? It still feels like looking through a telescope from a mansion at the struggles of everyday people.
Not when they actively synthesize multiple viewpoints. They aren't just looking at the 70s. They are observing that for a working-class couple today, buying that exact same house is virtually impossible.
That's true.
They also explore the darker history of the phrase itself, pointing out what the American dream historically meant to Native Americans. They are auditing the phrase, not claiming to be its current victims.
Okay, that structural audit makes a lot of sense. They also talked about a very modern anxiety that crosses all tax brackets, the algorithm of chaos.
This is a phenomenal observation by the band. It's the daily, relentless barrage of digital stress.
Think about your own morning routine. You wake up, you roll over, and you grab your phone. Before you even have coffee, you're hit with 3 global crises, 2 targeted ads making you feel insecure, and an endless feed of strangers arguing.
And that spike of dread you feel, that's the algorithm of chaos they are talking about. It's universal digital fatigue.
And that fatigue is inherently political, which brings up how they handle the modern era. Again, strictly looking at how they translate the world into their art.
Right. The band felt that Saviors needed to reflect the trajectory of America from the Obama era straight through the Trump era, capturing the sheer divisiveness of people just shouting at each other across the aisle.
They still firmly believe music should be dangerous, though, capable of tipping the needle. You saw this during their New Year's Eve television broadcast, where they changed a legacy lyric from Redneck Agenda to MAGA Agenda.
Yeah, and Billy Joe pointed out that he was proud of that moment, specifically because he actually sang it.
Right, he argued that tweeting an opinion is just off the top of the head. It's cheap. But standing on a stage and singing a conviction requires it to come from the heart.
It underscores their belief in the physical power of protest music. But if we peel back the political lenses and the rock operas, the actual engine keeping this band alive isn't conceptual at all. It's the very literal physical mechanics of their friendship.
Which brings us right back to Muse staring through the glass at Rack Studios in London. Green Day insists on recording live, in the same room. It's not just a quaint tradition, it actually changes the audio.
They are reacting in real time to the physical air moving in the room. When Trey Cool hits the kick drum, Mike Dirnt adjusts his bass groove instantly. Billy Joe alters his vocal emotion based on how hard the snare is being hit.
It's decades of shared muscle memory. They can feel the kinetic direction of a song before the next bar even starts. And that proximity is something they've cultivated since the very beginning.
The intimacy is almost absurd. Back in 1992, they played a gig on a farm in Minnesota where the promoter only provided a single microphone for the whole stage.
Oh, Mike.
So Billy and Mike had to sing harmony by pressing their faces together against this one mic. Billy joked that his primary memory of that entire era is just smelling Mike's breath.
We were practically sharing toothbrushes.
Yeah.
But, that kind of forced proximity either breaks a band into 1,000 pieces or forges an unbreakable alloy.
For Green Day, they developed very specific, non-negotiable rules for longevity. The core rule: you never ever air your grievances in public. They look at other bands tearing each other apart in the press and find it completely baffling.
If they are furious with each other, they close the door and handle it. It's a foundation of absolute kindness and respect, which sounds so simple, but in an industry designed to inflate egos, it's kind of radical.
It also helps that they've experienced the massive life shifts of fatherhood together. Fatherhood profoundly altered their music, culminating in incredibly vulnerable tracks like Father to a Son on the new album.
But fatherhood also altered them physically. They joked about acquiring literal dad strength.
Right.
Think about it. Carrying around strollers, car seats, and growing toddlers for 5 years builds up an entirely different layer of back and forearm muscle. They claim that extra bodily mass literally changes the kinetic impact of how they play. They are hitting their instruments significantly harder in their 50s than they did as scrawny 22-year-olds.
It's the perfect blend of physical reality and their trademark humor, and they apply that exact same grounded reality to their struggles. Billy Joe has become remarkably candid about his journey with addiction and sobriety.
Yeah, on the song Dilemma, he opens with the line, "Welcome to my problems, it's not an invitation."
He discusses the brutal reality of falling off the wagon with a philosophy that basically rejects the pressure of perfection. He stated, "Practice makes perfect. Nobody's perfect, so why practice?" It's a raw, realistic approach to recovery that strips away the Hollywood glamour and just focuses on surviving the day.
It's a willingness to show the shadows, not just the platinum records. But even when tackling heavy themes of addiction or political decay, they absolutely refuse to lose their punk rock spirit of fun. When they put out the album Father of All, they recorded a mashup featuring a Joan Jett song.
And when they discovered that one of the original co-writers of that track was, in their exact words, a complete creep, They didn't just quietly bury the song, they weaponized it.
Yes.
They took all of their royalties from the track and donated them directly to charities supporting victims of sexual assault.
See, that is the Gilman Street ethos, operating on a multi-million-dollar global scale. Protecting the vulnerable and rejecting abuse wasn't just a rule painted on a door in 1988. It's a mechanism they still use today.
But paired with that fierce morality is an absolute refusal to act their age. To promote that same album, they put out a call looking for a fan's actual backyard to play a gig in, and there are specific technical requirements for the writer: a bouncy house, a doggy door, and maybe a good trampoline.
I love that. They call themselves the older, less mature Green Day. Billy Joe had this vision of seeing three 80-year-old guys driving a convertible, all collectively flipping off their friend in a taxi cab and realizing, yep, that is exactly who we're going to be.
Viewing the concept of growing up as a corporate sham might be the most enduring punk rock ethos you can maintain, especially when navigating the tech-obsessed modern world, which perfectly cues up that brilliant 2010 Time magazine interview snippet.
Oh man, the iPad rant.
It is so good. The interviewer asked them to weigh in on the newly announced iPad. Most celebrities at the time were falling over themselves to praise Apple.
Right. But Green Day immediately calls it a bummer. They complain there's no keyboard, that it feels like you need a college degree to figure out what the gadgets actually do. But then Billy Joe hits this incredibly sharp, prophetic critique of Steve Jobs himself.
Because Steve Jobs had recently claimed he wanted to do for the book industry exactly what he had done for the music industry. Billy Joe caught the phrasing and acutely observed, "I'm not sure if that's for the music industry or to the music industry."
A completely devastating single-sentence critique of how tech giants disrupt and often decimate artistic ecosystems. And then they just bluntly concluded that the iPad was stupid.
It's the perfect encapsulation of who they are: sharply observant, fiercely protective of art, and completely unimpressed by corporate hype.
So tracing this entire trajectory, the mechanics of their survival become incredibly clear. We started with three kids shaped by the moral immune system rules of Gilman Street.
We saw them meticulously map out their future on 4-track cassettes, survive the literal mud of Woodstock, and then bypass their own punk guilt with eyeliner and alter egos to conquer the world with American Idiot.
And we watched that ambition age into the nuanced, line-by-line empathy of saviors, tackling our shared digital fatigue and the shifting realities of the working class. But the ultimate mechanism, the real reason the wheels never flew off the track, is a deep, fiercely protected brotherhood that keeps them looking each other in the eye in the exact same room.
Which leaves us staring at a rather fascinating paradox in the modern musical landscape.
Lay it on us.
If Green Day is now leaning deep into their 50s, fueled by literal dad strength and structural empathy, yet they are still the ones tasked with providing the dangerous, needle-moving protest music on national television, what does that actually say about the current state of rock music?
That is the question you have to ask yourself. Who in the younger generation is actually picking up that mantle? Or has the dangerous stadium-level spirit of punk permanently aged alongside Green Day, leaving a vacuum that no one else knows how to fill? It is something to seriously mull over the next time you pick up your phone and face the algorithm of chaos. Thank you for joining us on this wild 30-year deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, protect your own creative sandboxes, and we will catch you next time.